When I was in my early 20s, I was not very responsible with money. I liked drugs, lots of drugs. You get to a certain point with debt where your family, friends, and the bank won't lend you any more money. I ended up owing money to the wrong person, a lot of money. Let's call him Kev. Kev, a Neanderthal, brick wall hybrid of a man, came to my flat one morning while I was asleep and let himself in. He came into my bedroom, sat on the end of my bed and waited for me to wake up. I don't know how long he waited, but it must have been a good while, as I discovered 3 cigarette butts on the carpet later on. As I said, lots of drugs. When I finally awoke and saw this track-suited gorilla sitting on my bed, I was terrified. He simply smiled and said, "All right, mate? Get yourself up and make us a cup of tea, we need to talk." "Milk and sugar?" I replied, trying not to piss myself. Kev was all smiles and niceness, one of those men who is impeccably polite and all the more menacing for it. The conclusion of our talk was that I owed him $4,000, I only ever borrowed 2. Interest's a cunt in it, mate. I could pay him right then. He could break my arm, or I could do him a favor. I chose the favor. He sent me on holiday. A week later I was on an all-inclusive holiday to a shitty but okay resort in a seaside town in an Eastern European country. I tried to have a good time there. I didn't. On the morning before I was due to come home, a man came to me and gave me a bag with 4 bricks of cocaine in it. I was told to put it in my suitcase and forget about it. Just go home and give the bag to Kiev. It all went wrong at the airport. I checked in my bag and went to the departure lounge. I was having a drink to calm my nerves. Food was out of the question. I may be the only person to have lost weight on an all-you-can-eat and drink holiday. 4 policemen came into the bar. I was sick instantly. Real smooth. They armpit walked me to a small room on the other side of the airport where I was questioned for what seemed like days. I tried to plead ignorance, but they had subtle, knowing smiles the whole time. I was fucked. They asked me if I wanted to call my family or friends. I said, nobody cares. I called Kev. His response, "You're fucked." They drove me, for hours, to a facility up in the hills. I was not charged. I was not given a trial. I was handed over to 2 guards who made Kev look like a highly evolved and weedy scholar. I was stripped, hosed down and given a uniform consisting of threadbare pants and a grey shirt covered in faded brown stains. My protests were ignored by the guards. Let's call them Hans and Fritz. I don't think they spoke much English. They wore immaculate navy blue uniforms and black leather shoes and gloves. I was shoved in a tiny, grey cell that I couldn't lie down in without touching the walls. The door was steel with a slot in the bottom. There was a bucket in one corner next to a tap above a small drain. That is all. I tried the tap and rusty brown water came out. I drank it anyway. I lost track of how long I was in that room. There was a window high up on the back wall that marked the passing of day and night. Once a day the slot would open and a guard would yell, "Sheet," until I pushed the bucket out. The bucket would come back empty and then a small tray of slop would follow. The slop was disgusting watery stew. Once in a while there would be a scrap of meat or a piece of corn in it. I ate every last disgusting drop and licked the tray after. I screamed, I cried, I begged, I hammered against the door until my hands bled. I was never answered. I never heard a peep from another prisoner. Until one morning, the door opened. Hans and Fritz escorted me down a hallway to a room and shoved me inside, locking the door behind me. The room may have once been a shower as there was a drain in the floor but nothing else on the tiled surfaces apart from a single speaker next to a camera in one corner by the ceiling. A single fluorescent light buzzed high above the center of the room. Beneath it was a sturdy metal chair and a desk. Strapped to the metal chair with a gag in his mouth, was an unconscious man. The speaker buzzed into life and a very well-spoken, cheerful and husky, lightly accented voice said, "Hello prisoner 261. This was the first voice I had heard that wasn't my own in God knows how long, and it made me smile. "Hello prisoner 261. It repeated. "Hello," I replied. Good, good, you are not deaf. In front of you is a terrible criminal. He has done unspeakable things to his fellow man and he deserves to be punished. I have chosen you to carry out this punishment as a test. If you do what I tell you to exactly as I tell you to do it, you will pass the test and be set free. If you fail the test, you will be allowed to retake it at a later date. Do you understand?" His words were quick and unhesitating. I stood there like an idiot. "Do you understand, prisoner 261? Impatient. "I suppose, I. Confused. "You understand or you go back to your cell where you will fucking rot." The speaker screeched. "I understand, yes I understand." "Very good 261, very good, walk to the table." The man strapped to the chair had started to stir when the speaker screeched. He stared at me wide-eyed, but groggy. As confused as I was. I approached. "On the table there is a scalpel, pick it up and make a small cut somewhere on the man's body, anywhere you like," buzzed the speaker. Hearing this, the man strapped to the chair finally came out of his fugue and attempted to scream. The chair was too sturdy and the straps were too tight, he couldn't move an inch. The gag muffled his screams. I hadn't touched him yet. There was a scalpel on the table and a pair of pliers and a hammer and something else covered by a piece of fabric. "Do you want to pass the test and be freed 261? "Yes. Then there shall be no more hesitation. Trust me prisoner 261, this man has done unspeakable things to his brothers and sisters, he deserves it. If you hesitate again you will fail the test and go back to your cell. For how long? Who knows? Pick up the scalpel and cut him anywhere you like. Now." The man in the chair stopped screaming and started to moan muffled words through his gag. Tears and snot streamed down his face. The words were incomprehensible but I could tell they were, "Please don't." I picked up the scalpel and put an inch-long cut on his hand. "Good, very good 261. Put down the scalpel and pick up the pliers." I did as he asked. "Pull off one of his fingernails, any one you like." I picked up the pliers. I just wanted to go home. I held his left hand still with one hand and went to work with the pliers using my free hand. His nails were even longer than mine. I chose the nail on his little finger. It was harder than you would think but I managed. The nail came free with a tearing sound and with it a new barrage of screams from the man in the chair. If I had had any food on my stomach I would have been sick but yesterday's slop was a distant memory. I started to cry instead. "Excellent work 261, excellent, we are halfway done, you are nearly free. Put down the pliers and pick up the hammer." Casual. I did as I was asked. The man in the chair was shaking his head as much as he could but his head was strapped down as tight as the rest of him. I just wanted to go home and I had been assured that the man in the chair was a monster. "With the hammer, I want you to break one or more of this man's bones, anywhere you like 261, We are almost done. He sounded like he was reading a shopping list. I looked down at the man's bare feet on the cold tile floor. His blood was running off to one side into the drain with what I'm sure, given the smell, was his urine. I bent down and smashed the hammer into the two smallest toes on his left foot. They flattened. Screaming is not the word for what he did. It was a howl. It was inhuman. Fantastic 261, fantastic. We are nearly done, you are as good as free. Freedom awaits you, prisoner 261. Put down the hammer and pull back the sheet. There was a revolver under the sheet. My stomach lurched, I moaned. The man in the chair continued to cry and howl. He was alone with his pain for now. The revolver has 3 bullets and 3 empty chambers. Point it at his head and pull the trigger. He might die, he might not. He is a monster, he has done terrible things, but we let fate decide. Do this and you are free. I picked up the revolver and pointed it at the man's head. He was still sobbing and had his eyes closed. I couldn't do it. I can't. I won't. Take me back to my cell, please, I said through my tears, lowering the revolver as I did. The door behind me unlocked. I turned to see Hans and Fritz looming towards me. I panicked and pointed the revolver at them and pulled the trigger. Click. I tried again. Click. They were on me then, one holding me still while the other delivered a hammer blow to my head with his leather-clad fist and the bottom fell out of my world. I awoke with a pounding head. I couldn't move. I was strapped to a chair. As my vision cleared, I saw a man standing in front of me wearing threadbare pants and a grey shirt covered in faded brown stains. Hello, prisoner 262. In front of you is a terrible criminal. He has done unspeakable things to his fellow man and he deserves to be punished. I have chosen you to carry out this punishment as a test. If you do what I tell you to exactly as I tell you to do it, you will pass the test and be set free. If you fail the test, you will be allowed to retake it at a later date. Do you understand? I started screaming.